Hi, Robin. How are you?
I'm well, and you, Trey?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm so excited to chat with you today because I love Tick Tick Boom so much. As someone who was familiar with Rent, but not so familiar with Jonathan Larson's story, when I first screened the film, I felt like I was taken on a journey about so much that I did not know. I was like, how did I not know all of this? Like, I've known Rent, but I didn't know like any of this. So I was so thrilled to watch it. And first, I wanted to ask you, since you were on Rent on Broadway, what was it like taking part in the film adaptation of Tick Tick Boom? I felt like it was kind of like, it was kind of interesting being in the situation of being in Rent and now in this, which is kind of like Rent, but not really Rent, but also at the same time. What was that experience like?
Yeah. I want to also address what you said about not knowing Tick Tick because I feel like part of the reason we were robbed of knowing Tick Tick was because of 9/11. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was
Yeah.
what shut off Broadway shows. Just
Yeah,
it
yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
sustain itself financially, so we were robbed of knowing it because who knows if it could have transferred even.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then your actual question, I just had it and it left my brain. Sorry about that.
Since
Along
you were
that,
in Rent on Broadway,
yes,
what was it like taking part in this Tick Tick Boom film adaptation?
it was it was really beautiful because I felt like I had so much information and it felt like I was already a member of the family.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
I also felt like I came in as a disciple of musical theater and a disciple of Jonathan Larson.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt like, of course I'm the one that's here. I deserve to be here. Like I know, even if my performance was busted, which it isn't, but even if it was, I came in with integrity and a desire to honor Jonathan and his
Mhm.
legacy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And what were some things that you think that you learned about Jonathan that you didn't know before playing Michael? Like I'm sure that you have studied him over the years, and of course you were in Rent, all of that. But was there anything that you didn't really realize about him before you were in this role?
I don't know why I'm surprised. I was surprised by this because it's on full display in all of his writing, but just like how hard he loved his friends. He
Mm-hmm.
was so giving. It's very easy to think that Jonathan it was like self-indulgent and me, but he really that wasn't the case at all.
Uh-huh.
He Lynn was telling us the other day that he would like leave gifts for his friends randomly or like write them songs. He was always
Mhm.
thinking about them and always wanting to celebrate them. And that to me, that's how my friends are. That's how that's our culture, which is why it's so hard to get in our circle because if you're not at that level, then we can't be bringing you in.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really beautiful to watch.
Yeah, and I also want to talk about how by me not knowing a lot about Tick Tick Boom, I was kind of surprised. I don't want to say surprised, but kind of surprised in a good way because it is Jonathan Larson's story, but it's so intersectional. Like you have what's going on with Michael, you have what's going on with Susan, you have what's going on with Carolyn. It's kind of everyone's story is kind of looped in a way where it's about Jonathan, but it's not just solely about him. It's about everyone's story who's in there. So how did that feel for you to tackle so much, with the AIDS crisis, with things that Jonathan was going through, racism, sex, all of that stuff in
Yeah.
this film under this one lens.
It's so Jonathan. It's so like even though Jonathan didn't write this screenplay, but when you look at Rant, the way
Mm-hmm.
he brought in all the different people from his life, and he brought in people of different colors, he brought in different sexualities, and he brought them in a way that was full bodied. Like we get scenes with meat. We get to actually contribute something. We
Yeah,
we we change. Me and Susan, we change Jonathan. We help
yeah,
him see himself, and and so like that was really cool and really beautiful, but there was also responsibility I found for me in honoring my culture in that time period, a culture of Black and Latinx folks who had been erased from the conversation about HIV and AIDS, who
yeah,
had experienced gay colonization.
yeah, yeah,
And so now to take a period piece and to put me in it and to let me tell my story, I feel like I get to honor the elders that I never got to meet, but that I needed.
yeah, yeah. That's deep. That's deep.
It
And
is.
yeah, and the thing about it is too is like you because there could have been a version of this where easily, you know, Michael and Stella and everyone else were like stepping stones in Jonathan's journey, which they are, but that's not just what they are. It's
Yeah.
like your characters don't exist as a purpose to teach Jonathan a lesson about something that he needs to know. It's like you have the full story there, and I think that's what makes this, you know, so special. I was because I was just sitting there when I was like, wow, this is like full circle. This is a lot. This
It's
is
a lot, but also even just watching like Michael and Jonathan as friends, like
Mhm.
watching a straight cis man
That part too.
with a gay man who have such intimacy, who are
Mhm.
so ride or die, who can like hug it out, hold each other's face. And it's not about sex. It's not about
Yeah.
sexuality. It's just pure love, love and
Mhm.
respect for one another. I've never seen that.
Yeah, yeah, me either. It's definitely, and especially when you think about, you know, the time period too. Like this isn't like, you know, even because even we were talking about this in 2020. I mean, yeah, it's evolved now, but we still wouldn't be talking about it in that similar way even today. So that's kind of revolutionary even in that aspect.
Yes, and also I want to say that when I said we don't see that, what I meant is we don't see that in media. I do see it in real life.
Yeah,
I would
exactly,
like to see it
exactly. Yes.
more, but I do see that in real life.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And because the themes of Tick Tick Boom are kind of they're really grounded, how did you relate to Michael and what he was going through during this project? Because he was really going through it at one point. I was like, you know, give Michael a break. Like someone please give Michael a break.
You're like, can Michael
There
win
was
the
a I was
lotto
like,
or
yeah, come
something?
on. Yes.
You're like, why
So
is it consistently oppressed?
I was like, just someone, anybody. But how were you able to, outside of, you know, being every part of his identity, how else did you relate to the character?
Ooh, I feel like in certain in my friendships, I have moments where I'm the one just like floating and spiraling and then neurotic and mid crisis.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also moments in this friends of mine where I am the grounded one. I am the one who tethers. You know, we're each other's therapists.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that was something I felt very, very familiar with. Like the person that you can lean into, the person that grounds you, that helps you remind you who you are. That's the culture I have with my friends.
Yeah, yeah. And how was it working with or reuniting with Lin Manuel Miranda for this project? You know, years after In the Heights, and working with him on, you know, a passion project of his on top of all of that.
It was cool. I was really happy and like so proud of him. There were so many good things. I feel like I could go on about like things that you would already assume because he's just such a great person. But it's really cool now. We're experiencing like this press junket, right?
Mhm.
And we're doing all these panels, and
Yeah,
there are these moments where he and I just look up and we see each other, like
yeah,
really see
yeah.
each other. And I don't know how else to describe that, but there's just like there's such a depth there, such a deep love for one another and a respect. And I feel like in general, the whole cast, we're so emotional and raw right now. And we're sensitive artists, and this is a really
Uh-huh.
beautiful movie that we're proud of and excited to share with everyone. But I
Yeah.
feel like we keep delivering monologues to one another with just our eyes.
You're just looking like, wow, we're here. Like after all this, we're here.
After the Ponder Replay pandemic,
Look, it's
after you know, all of that, the movie still got made.
yeah.
And it matters,
Hmm.
like that the movie's here, and that it matters when we're talking about racial justice and social justice. It matters. I feel like everyone's overwhelmed with social justice right now, but I think we're all supposed to be. I think that's
Yeah.
like that's what we need to be feeling.
Yeah.
um but it's also like the story that we're telling is also musical. It's also
Hmm.
fun. It's also light. It's also an escape. So
Yeah.
there's great beauty and lightness in that. And there's also that thing that's like, hey, so this epidemic that we experienced in the 80s and 90s is not that different than the one we're experiencing right now.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like the
Exactly.
Venn diagram is kind of just one circle.
Yeah, yeah. I liked how you talked about kind of like the tone of it because, you know, when I was watching, I was like, okay, I'm sad, but it's like, oh, this is joyful. Like, oh, I'm sad again. But like, it's but all of the feelings are like interconnected though. Like it all makes sense because,
Because it's
you know,
human.
you can relate to it and it's so, in line with things that we unfortunately go through now because, like you said, we have to, if we weren't, mobilized by injustice, then we wouldn't feel this push to want to see better and want to do better. So like sometimes you still need that. You still need that aspect to
There's a
art.
balance to it too, and I feel like we've been discussing that today, even the casts and how we discuss the movie as well. And I feel like we need to sit with our feelings sometimes. We need to be introspective. We need to do shadow work to like go to those dark places and feel those
Mm,
feelings. But we also need to be centering joy. We
yeah,
also need to give ourselves an escape from that. We need to, and the escape is not to escape forever. The escape is a relief so you can come back to it
yeah.
and we
So
can
you
keep
can
contributing.
take your breath. You can take your breath and then
100%.
resume things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. And this is, I was gonna say in a year, but it has been a year because the Boys in the Band came out in 2020. I was like, oh my gosh, 2020, 21 have been one big year. But that was
Mm.
last year. But this is your second Broadway to film adaptation in about a year. What do you think you've learned about everything it takes to bring a play to the big screen, or I guess the streaming screen or whatever?
Yeah.
How do you think that how's that enlightened you with bringing these stage pieces to film?
Well, I love it. Like, kudos to Netflix for clocking that there was a desire for this,
Mm,
right? I don't really feel like there's much of a difference. The big difference for me is the dialogue.
mm,
When you take a stage show and you take the script and turn it into a screenplay, there's sometimes going to be some monologues and longer scenes, and that doesn't
mm,
always happen with filmmaking. I love that. I love figuring out ways to open the scene over the course of like 3, 4 pages. And in Boys in the Band, I had like an 8-minute monologue.
yeah.
And like that's something you rarely see. I was just trying to channel Viola Davis and Fences in the best way. You know what I mean? I was like, I'm trying to be at that level, you know? It's really cool. It's really
Yeah.
fun. It can be a bit intimidating because it feels like the medium is not intended for such long scenes, but
Mhm.
really it's just like when the right people handle it, then
Yeah.
it's done well. And I've also been really, really blessed with two great directors because Joe Mantello, that Boys in the Band was his second film, but in many ways he experienced it as his first time
Mm.
directing a movie. I feel really lucky that I got to experience him having that moment and Lin having that
Yeah.
moment because I learned things from both of them. And with
Mm.
Joe, it was cool because Joe's been doing this for a minute. He's been around. He knows his stuff. He's one of the greatest that we have on
Yeah.
the stage. And one of the things that made me giggle about him, I love this. He had no problems asking questions. He had no problem. Someone
Mm.
would say reference something about movie making. He goes, "What's that?" And there was no shame attached to it because he's so
Mhm.
grown and he's been doing this for so long that he's not going to do that to himself. And
Yeah.
then someone would describe whatever this thing was in filmmaking. He go, "Oh, that's like on stage when we do this. Gotcha."
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool because I feel like I'm learning through their learning.
Yeah. It's that must be something to be in these like because these moments that came right now are never gonna happen. Like you're never gonna be able to work with Lin Manuel on his feature directorial debut
Yeah,
ever
you only have a
again.
debut once.
Yes. And lastly, personally for you, out of all the many themes that this movie has, personally, what's one major takeaway that you hope resonates with the viewers when they're watching this film?
It's cheesy, but it's real. Are you in your life at this present moment? Are you choosing fear or are you choosing love?
Mm. And I think that's such a big takeaway during the pandemic because people have like such different like I know personally for me I have a different perception of time than I did in early 2020. I'm like, okay, well maybe I shouldn't put this off, or maybe I should do this. And it's kind of cliche, but again, like when watching this movie and like thinking about everything we've been through, it kind of like it lines up. It's like you just, especially considering everything that Jonathan did and having his work come at his biggest work come after his death and things like that. It's just like, go for it.
I mean, it's so funny. This wasn't the question you asked, but I've been thinking so much about the pandemic and the fact that we all face mortality so much every single
Mm,
day watching it, and like, what does that do to people? And
yeah.
one of the things that I'm loving right now is like, I think certain people were liberated. Yeah, yes,
Mm,
there's weight. Yeah, yes, don't get me wrong. Like real things are happening, like real heavy things. But there's
Mm-hmm.
also this other thing of like, yo, the news, people are dying every day. What am I doing? What do I want to
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
I've been masking, I've been subscribing to certain rules, and now I'm gonna say, you know what? I'm liberated. I'm gonna do whatever the
Yeah.
fuck I want. Because I don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah. It's
Um,
but you do feel that relief and that reflection, like just go for it. Just do
yeah,
it. Just and that's
yeah.
the good message from this film as well. But thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed chatting with you and I can't wait for everyone to see this movie.
Thank you. Take
All right.
care.
Thank you. Bye.